I like to think about it like the law gives you the right to construct a fence around your work, and you get to determine who has access, how they use it, how long that access lasts for, if they have to pay for that access. But you have those rights.
Greetings, Apreneurs. Welcome to the Authorpreneur Secrets podcast, the show that uncovers the secrets to win with books beyond book sales and dominate entrepreneurship. Through exclusive author interviews, stories, and must-have resources, you will discover some of the secrets and strategies to thrive with books and generate lasting income. I invite you to become an Authorpreneur ambassador and join me in my mission to raise up 10,000 Caribbean entrepreneurs by 2030. Spread the word about the podcast and encourage more people to increase their impact and income with books beyond book sales. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Greetings, Apreneurs. Welcome to episode 134 of the Authorpreneur Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Ruth, and in today's show, I'm going to give you a recap of the Caribbean Authorpreneur Summit that went on over the weekend of January 19 to 20, and I'm going to play a clip from the summit on copyright by Jihan Williams, an attorney at law specializing in intellectual property rights, and she's from St. Kitts and Nevis. And so you want to stay tuned. Book publishing has many paths, and just figuring out where to go at each stage can be confusing. But with insights and guidance from author experts just like us, you can tackle the writing process competently and be assured that the goal of being a published author is within reach. Welcome to the Caribbean Authorpreneur Summit, the place for Caribbean authors to shine. With each staging of our summit, leading Caribbean author experts at home and in the diaspora share their stories and strategies to win with books beyond book sales. In the process, aspiring and published authors are inspired and lives are transformed. The Caribbean Authorpreneur Summit will ensure that fewer books die in the minds of their authors, more manuscripts become published legacies, and precious lives are transformed with the turn of each page. All right, so the summit was a success. I loved the comments and the feedback, and I had the attendees prophesying over their books, playing Lamborghini song, "This is my year, I'm going to do great." But instead of saying I'm going to do great, we talked about my book is going to do great. No one can stop it. And then there's a young lady who was so eager about the summit, and she said that she is going to finish her book, and she had been trying to write this book for about 5 years. And then on day 2 of the summit, she reported, Marley, that she had burnt the midnight oil and finished the manuscript. I was like, wow, 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 wow. That was fabulous. So the week leading up to the summit, I did an interview on a new show called Women Up. That's a talk show. And I was the second guest for season 1. And I was able to share my personal story, the story behind my first book, Heartache Queen Unshackled, which is now republished as Unshackled Queen, how heartbreak led me, to writing and the start of this business, how that pain was turned into something glorious. And then I had to present the Authorpreneur Secret Academy and the vision for the academy and invite people to the summit. So that helped. And as a result, more people came to the summit. Some have already started to sign up for the Authorpreneur Secrets Academy. And what we did this year that we didn't do for the other years was to remove the paywall. So all 4 sessions are on YouTube on the Authorpreneur Secrets channel. And I want you to subscribe to the channel because I'll be doing more teaching and putting things out. All right. So subscribe to the channel. And the subscribership went up during the summit, still not at 500. We want to get to our first 1,000 and then, 10,000 and then 100,000 and then 1 million, right? We'd have to make it a bit more interesting to get to 1 million, because it's more educational and not entertaining, and that can take a while to build up. Right. So people are signing up for the academy. The launch of Vision 2030 and just tying that in with, for example, Jamaica's National Development Plan, where the government has expressed that they want to use intellectual property as a tool for socioeconomic development. That, just making the connection with our Vision 2030 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 was just another awesome thing to do. And I'm just seeing how everything is coming together. The summit will continue until 2030. The podcast will continue at least until 2030. I can't guarantee that after that I'm going to continue. So we're going to do everything in our power to achieve Vision 2030, which is to raise up 10,000 author entrepreneurs or authorpreneurs. That is an author who is using their book to create one profitable initiative beyond just selling the book. Just one. We believe that can help you to create financial freedom faster than just selling the book, which is what happened to me, and replicating that. And this is also a way to help families, because a book is intellectual property. It's an asset that can be passed on from one generation to the next. And if you learn how to monetize it and maximize it, that is wealth creation right there. And so Michael also presented on AI. That's Michael Laron. And it was just a great time. Going out today, when the podcast is being aired, will be the Summit Toolkit with the speaker notes, how to write and publish cost effectively, AI, copyright, the Vision 2030. So it was a lot of inspiration and information. And then today, as I'm recording, my interview with Howard Lovey of the Alliance of Independent Authors, their self-publishing advice inspirations podcast came out. It's audio only, it's 19 minutes. And again, it captures my story from childhood, 19 minutes, not 90, and my author vision. And I am so grateful. So I want to thank Women Up for having me. I want to thank Howard Lovey for having me. And I want to thank all our 9 presenters at the summit. It was great. And we're looking forward to the 2025 summit, which will be about marketing. It's going to be all about marketing, because that's an area that our authors struggle with. And so with eyes fixed on Vision 2030, let's continue with the mission. And to help us to fully grasp, well, maybe not fully, but to give us a better understanding of the importance of a book and how it can help us with socioeconomic development, we need to understand copyright. And so Jihan's presentation on copyright, to be honest, was the first I heard such a plain and clear presentation on copyright. And I've been reading on copyright and listening to others, but her presentation on copyright was the clearest and plainest I've ever heard. And she offered us 10 things that we need to be mindful of. And in the Summit Toolkit, those 10 things are going out. And what I'm going to do as a gift to the listeners of this podcast, even though you didn't attend the summit, I'm going to put a link where you can get the Summit Toolkit, because it will benefit you. So I'll update the show notes at some point. And even the next episode, I'll give that out so that you can benefit from it, because we have the speaker's notes, which are so important. We also have free resources in there, and the Academy, Authorpreneur Secret Academy handbook is there, so you can see all the offerings. And so when this goes out, we have 8 days before the 1 time per year offer closes to help you to publish your book cost effectively for under $1,000 US. You have to join the Authorpreneur Secrets Academy membership group by the end of January to seize that offer, because we know that publishing is much more than that, right? And we have proof of concept. It's not going to be an inferior book. It should be a small book between 10 and 30,000 words to get this done. right? So we want to encourage you to get on board. So it's authorpreneursecrets.com/ASAM. That's ASAM. And I'll put the links in the show notes. So let's hear from Jihan.
My goal today is to actually give you 10 pieces of information related to copyright that every writer or author should know. It's important as writers that we know these things because copyright is the basis that determines a number of issues that arise on our entrepreneur journey. So we're talking about issues relating to ownership, royalties. I'm sure we're going to get into that issue as Ruth mentioned, liability, if you copy somebody else's work, or the rights that you have where your work has been copied. So let's get into it. We're covering 10 things that every writer or author should know about copyright. So, number one, of course, what is copyright? So, copyright is a bunch of exclusive rights that the law gives to persons who create original works. So, these works have to be artistic, literary, dramatic, or musical. It also extends to sound recordings, so think audiobooks, films, broadcasts, cable programming. A literary work, a book is a literary work. So once it's original, authors have legal rights to their book. So the first thing I want you to remember is that books are legally protected property. Property, just like your house. Number two, so what rights do you have as an author when you write an original book? So the law gives you a set of rights, as I mentioned, that only you as the author has. Now, these rights include the right to copy it, the right to adapt it, the right to put issues out into the public, the right to put it on the internet. There's just a slew of rights that you have in relation to this book that you have originally created. I like to think about it like the law gives you the right to construct a fence around your work, and you get to determine who has access, how they use it, how long that access lasts for, if they have to pay for that access. But you have those rights. So number two, of course, is know what your specific rights are as an author. Number three, the rights that copyright law grants when you create an original book is automatic. Say it with me, where whoever you are, automatic. There's no further process that you have to undergo to have copyright. However, registration is worth considering, and it really has been saving some people, and I'm sure we're going to get into that as well, as Ruth mentioned. But it's registration helps to create evidence that you are the author. So, in other words, you don't have to do anything. So, after you've written the book, you don't have to do anything extra to get copyright. However, it is within your best interest to ensure that you establish pieces of evidence surrounding ownership to prove that you are the author, just in case it ever becomes a question. So, let's use registration as an example and put it in a very practical sense that we could understand. If you went to a store and you bought a pair of pants and you paid and you walked out of the store and the buzzer went off, somebody might say, well, there's an inference that maybe you stole the pants. But having a receipt, something to prove that you paid for it, would actually give you the basis to prove that you have paid for this pants and you are in fact the owner. So a registration certificate actually does that for you, but it doesn't have to be just a registration certificate. There are other things that you could do as an author to establish pieces of evidence that help to prove that you are the owner, should that ever become an issue. But we could always go more into that. Number four. Now, copyright lasts as long as you're alive and for a number of years after your death. Now, that number varies from country to country. In some Caribbean islands, it's 50. So in St. Kitts and Nevis, it's 50 years. In the US, UK, Canada, it's 70. Jamaica is 95, and I think Mexico is still at the top for the highest, which is 100 years. So that means that if you, once you are alive, you have these rights. And for years after, you still have rights depending on the country that is at subject. So it's important to know as well that even after you have passed, these things you can still earn from it, or your estate, of course, would still earn from it. So please, if I'm happy that Ruth covered estate planning last year, because of course, if you're thinking about these sorts of issues, you should also think to include your book and the income from your book in your will, or any other estate planning initiative that you're thinking about. Not just don't protect your house. Your book is property as well. Number 5, you may also be protected outside of your country. So normally with intellectual property, you're only protected in the country where you are registered. So for example, I love to hear that Ruth said she trademarked Authorpreneur Secrets. But if she trademarked that in Jamaica, she's only protected in Jamaica. If she wants protection in the US, she would also have to apply in the US as well. However, that's with trademarks, but with copyright, you may actually be protected outside of your country. That's a bit of a longer explanation, so I'll just leave it there and allow you to ask me if you're so interested. So let's just do a quick recap of 1 to 5 before we move on. So your book is legally protected property. The law gives authors exclusive rights when you are an author. So know what you can do. 3, these rights are automatic. 4, these rights last as long as you are alive and for a number of years after your death. And 5, your book may be protected in more countries than your home country. So these are things to bear in mind. So let's get into number 6. Now, copyright protects expression, not ideas or intention. This is very important because we often love to say that somebody copied our work or accuse other people of copying other work. But copyright protects expression, not ideas or intention. So, for example, my book is about pregnancy loss support. Anybody else can write a book on that topic. So that is the idea. However, if their work is an identical or substantially similar expression like mine, so if you took page 7 out of my book and it looks like it's part of your book, it's substantially similar to the work that is included in your book, then is when we can start thinking about whether there has been copyright infringement. So we have to be clear, it protects expressions, not ideas. And if you have an intention to write a book, somebody didn't copy your idea if they wrote it before you. You have an intention to write, but until you have expressed it in writing, there wouldn't be any copyright protection. Number 7, don't forget to include your copyright disclaimer in your book. This is the parts you usually find in the first pages of a book. So that's to say, for example, all rights reserved. The author does not allow use of any part of this book without any written consent or things of that nature. This is you letting the world know that there is a legal fence around your book. Number 8, refrain from using other people's work in your own work. Because if you do, you may have to ask for permission, and at the very least, you'll have to sufficiently acknowledge the author of the work that has been incorporated in yours. So in every case, you would have to consider whether or not whether it is important, whether you would have to get permission to use a portion of the book or a portion of somebody else's work. We can get more into that if there are questions. But using other people's work would mean that you'd have to get permission, or at the very least sufficiently acknowledge the author and the title of the work that you have incorporated in yours. Which leads me to number 9. Know that the public domain in copyright has a specific meaning that is different from public domain that we understand in natural language. In copyright, public domain means works that are no longer protected by copyright. So this is where the time period that I mentioned earlier, where it has run out. So where it has run out, the works then are said to enter the public domain. When works are in the public domain, you don't have to ask permission to use them. However, if we think about the term public domain in our natural English language, we tend to think about it as it being somewhere where it's accessible. It is very important for you to know that as authors and as writers, access does not equal authority. You may have access to information on the internet. However, you don't necessarily have the authority to use it or incorporate it in your work. So if you're not sure, this is a question you have to ask when you're using other people's information. Do I have access or do I have authority? And then lastly, clearly establish ownership when working with collaborators, such as illustrators, ghostwriters, and joint authors. When it comes to questions of ownership with other people, it is always best to put it in writing. You are free to determine what split you want, whether somebody gets 40, somebody gets 60, somebody gets 5% of ownership. It's free to you to determine, for you all to come together and make an agreement about ownership. But there must be an agreement about ownership, and it's always best to put it in writing. So to recap, number 6 to 10, copyright protects expression, not ideas or expression intention. 7, include a copyright disclaimer in your book. Number 8, know the rules when using other people's work in your work. 9, access to work does not equal to authority to use. And number 10, establish ownership in writing when working with collaborators or joint authors. So those are my 10 things that I hope that everybody walks away learning and understanding. But of course, if you want more information, I'm happy to help. Thanks so much.
All right. I trust that you got value from it and you have a better understanding of copyright. Again, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel because the podcast is also aired on the channel. Sometimes it's a video podcast, sometimes it's just audio. So I want to encourage you to share it with your friends. It's value for your time, especially if you want to be a successful author, entrepreneur, and learn to write and publish books cost effectively and learn to monetize your books, earn multiple income streams, and just be inspired by the testimonials of other authors who are doing it. And if you want to learn more about publishing, this is a channel to stay tuned to. This is Ruth Taylor, again reminding you of making many books. There is no end. So go pen it to win it and dominate authorpreneurship. Ta for now, until next time.